I mean,
Yeah.
mine
Mine are to the point of almost being gone, but that's why I stick with such a basic goal.
are we online? Everyone's so upset that this is my last night of being chair, I'm sure.
We haven't voted yet.
Why are we?
I have termed out. I am not allowed to do it any further.
Wait.
It's
I
the
thought the term-
Bylaws.
I thought the term was only with regards to the position, not chair or vice chair.
It's in the bylaws, 3 years.
As
Chair.
Chair. No, she could go back to vice
That's all
chair.
been a year since we.
I moved to.
It's been like 7 years.
That one's for me.
You could do that.
What was it?
Okay, you're jumping ahead of yourself, so.
Okay, oh,
Look at the agenda.
we're gonna let the chair run the meeting, I guess.
As well as I can. So we are live. Are
Yes.
we recording?
Yes.
Is Alan, can we, will we
Alan's
see if he
not here
comes
yet.
in? We'll see. Okay.
Okay.
Then let's start. Agenda and materials review. This is why I shouldn't be chair. I can't even
You're
like use
doing
my
great.
words. Does everyone approve of the agenda? As it is?
I have a question. So I wasn't here last month. Did we change, did we change when public comment was to the end last month,
No,
this month? Was there a request or we just thought, well,
I'll check in with you over the break. There was guidance from the city about that, but I'll check. in
okay,
with you.
I mean, my only concern was, I mean, I guess if we don't. Is because the way the ordinance is written that they can't comment on the case at hand.
Mhm.
Okay, you'll talk
Yeah.
about it later, okay?
Mhm.
Anyway, that one.
I'll be part of that check-in too, since I also was. Okay. So with that, are we good with the agenda?
Mhm.
All right, and then we'll move on to minutes approval, which Bernadette and I will both not be part of. Do you have any adjustments?
I do have a couple of adjustments. I think at the bottom of the minutes, I think these are the greatest minutes ever. There was something that I didn't feel was important. It had talked about how I was grateful to be on the CRB. I moved to strike that. And there were other things that were important that were not included. I mentioned or had asked the auditor how the fact that the officers went into the residence, or the fact that the complaining party let the officers into the residence after they had done the entry without permission,
Mhm.
and you said it did not factor into your decision. 2 other board members also asked about that, and it was not included in the record, so I think that would have been important.
I'm also glancing at the minutes now and they're not using gender neutral pronouns.
If you'd like, if someone so moved, we could, actually, I don't think you need to move it, a motion. We could take that back and bring it back to you in January. We can do further edits and bring it back in January.
For
If they
the-
don't,
yeah,
if
for
they
the-
don't pass approval, listen,
Okay.
or something.
Well,
right?
especially since we have 3 people that were at the meeting
Yeah.
that aren't
Yeah.
here and 2 that were not at the meeting.
So you can
Should we do
table
that?
them
Yeah, let's-
until
it
January.
sounds like-
We'll send
Yeah.
revised minutes
Yeah.
with your updates around to everybody in the next packet.
Thanks, let's do that. Let's move and let's do that. Woo. Corman.
Really going out with a bang.
Comments from board members and commission. Would anyone like to start with commenting?
I can start. So first, it's been fun to see all of the cute things that the department has been doing, like the shop that got about super cute. I'm pretty sure you posted it. You were there. Officer Jones was there. It was super fun. And then we did a training a couple of months ago that you gave us, and I thought that that was really helpful. One of the things that I learned that I didn't realize before is that between like 55 to 56% of cases that you file or that you make are sustained by the chief, and I think that that is an important number. And that's
You have the Native American speech?
Oh,
Somebody has
land
it.
acknowledgement.
Your land acknowledgement. Okay. I can bring it to you.
Well, I've been hearing a lot of pushback against those, so maybe we should talk about that, but it's up to you.
Would you like me to print your copy?
Oh, I thought it was city designated that we were
Nope.
supposed to do it. We just started doing it. Okay. What would you like to do?
Let's skip it this month, but we can also acknowledge our privilege by being here. Is that comfortable for everyone?
Yeah, I mean, because while I appreciate the acknowledgement, the thought behind it, I think then there's also the flip side of the other things that the state of Oregon. Blacks couldn't live here laws, that were on the books. And I mean, I think there's so many things that we could acknowledge that we could do better. That I think sometimes we end up having so much of that put in. That becomes. Just rote, and so it doesn't really have a lot of meaning when it's just, we're just gonna do this every month. I prefer the organic conversations.
I wasn't prepared to talk about this today, but one thing, I can't, is it Native American Heritage Month this month? Last month.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so then maybe in the future, if we decide not to do a land acknowledgement, I think that what you had said about it being rote is probably true, then maybe we could acknowledge it American Heritage Month and other.
And acknowledge Black
Mhm.
Heritage Month in
Yes.
February.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
I would prefer to have somebody check and, it's like, have a point of interest of acknowledgement at the beginning of the meeting. Nothing big, but I think it kind of goes with our education sort of piece, that it's like, I mean, we're here to represent the community and to the police department, and then take what the police department thinks and represent it back to the community. And I think having those sorts of rotating ideals discussed, I think it would go a long ways, because discussion is kind of what we're lacking in society these days, hard conversations in a nice collegial way. So,
Which we tend to be good at
Yeah.
here.
I
So that's
think we're
good.
pretty good at it most of the time. I don't feel like I'm attacked most of the time.
We can, our team can work with whoever is chair and vice chair at our agenda setting meetings to make sure we have something like that. Acknowledgement or something. Yeah, we'll make it good.
Sure.
That's what I'm saying.
Thanks. Otherwise, I'm sorry I missed last month.
October.
We missed.
Oh, yeah, November, we weren't here at all.
No.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed October.
Oh, was it 2
Would
months?
you like to explain yourself?
I was driving across Tennessee. I don't like the highways of Tennessee. I'm not sure I care for them.
Are they too fast?
They're like really steep and narrow with no shoulders. And trucks that go really super fast and in both lanes. And both of the people I was with, they couldn't drive because they had knee issues. Old people, God, what are you gonna do? Older sisters. Anyway, so it was just one of those things. It was like, it was beautiful, but I was not expecting it to be like that on an interstate. It scared me.
I would like a training topic on your.
Oh, yeah, zorbing. If you get a chance to zorb, like totally do it. So much fun. Better than bungee jumping.
Is that where you're inside a ball?
Yeah.
Okay, keep making sure.
All right, Rick, do you have comments?
No comments.
Comments?
That is recorded.
Well,
I'm
not asked to
curious
do it.
if a training topic on the kind of contextual history in Eugene or Oregon as a whole might be interesting, just to give us some context of how
Sure,
things fit,
yeah. We can work on that.
just an option.
And
Belonging part one,
What's that?
belonging training part one, the city
Yes.
offers.
Oh,
Oh, so we have
It's really
some.
good.
cool.
Start there.
Yeah, start.
Something else.
No, I don't think so. Okay, one thing, it should, like, I think that it would be really powerful for the department to give a training that was like. Very aware. One anecdote that I'll give is in a history class, I learned that the Eugene Police Department, so not like a million years ago, but sometime recent, used to enforce sundown in Eugene. So I'd love to hear more about that and how we're gonna do better. How you imagine that you plan on doing better. That would be cool.
History class here in Eugene.
Yeah, you have fun.
Oh.
Oh,
Well, sorry.
19. What is it, Sunday?
I'm not sure the date, but not,
Oh.
yeah, I know that, I've heard that also.
yeah,
It's a fun research project.
yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, and Oregon, if we're gonna go there, like Oregon was created as a state that was exclusionary, so.
The
And all-
KKK was very involved in the Portland Police Department. I don't think they were here.
Well, and the governors too, like the governor
Yeah.
was, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that does inform a lot of things that happen in our town now. like, I mean, our history informs the present generally, for the good and the bad. So yes, let's move on. Training topic. Is Alan still not?
I don't
Okay.
see an email, but I don't know that my email is working.
I think I checked mine real quick, just to make sure.
All right, let's talk alternative response.
Okay,
So, apologize, I'm a little prepared on alternative response because I was of the understanding we weren't actually training tonight, so I'm gonna wing it a little bit, so. Oh, you don't need to apologize, just a communication thing. So let's talk cahoots briefly. I think you guys are all aware, crisis assistance helping out in the streets. It's got a long history here in the city of Eugene. And it's a model across the country. In fact, after the events of 2020, we absolutely got blown up with requests for information on cahoots, and that continues through today. Solid relationship between us and cahoots. And if you're not aware of how that's configured, there's a medic and a crisis worker that are in a van, and they're dispatched to calls for service involving medical issues or other mental health issues that really, quite frankly, that's a better resource to go than a police officer. It really is. So it's a model program. And there's a lot of these programs that are offshooting throughout the United States. And we'll talk about behavioral health on the street here in just a minute and what that looks like. But last year we made the decision to move cahoots away from the or from the police department to the fire department. A few reasons why that happened, but there's two primary ones, and that is it's a better service delivery mechanism to have, you know, a medic and a first response for mental health attached to your fire department. That's more, basic life support, advanced life support response. So in that sense, it made better business sense to have it allocated into the fire department. And, you know, really, quite frankly, from a budget perspective, this also made sense for us to locate it into the fire department as well. So there's the two major reasons why cahoots was moved into the fire department. There's somewhat of a misconception, I think, or a misnomer, so to speak, that once we moved into the fire department, there's no longer a relationship with the police department. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, cahoots still operates much the same way that they did as though they were under the police department umbrella. They still have the computers in the car. They're still responding to the same calls for service. And we still have the same interaction with cahoots. Officers will show up on the scene of a medical or behavioral health, mental health crisis or crisis of some kind. And they'll request cahoots response. Quite often still, cahoots will request our response in those times where they have violent patients or other things going on that require police officer response. So it's still a very solid relationship. From a leadership perspective between Chief Skinner and I and some of the discussions we've had, we would certainly like to see that relationship bigger or broader. And
Oh, that's soothing.
my apologies.
No.
If it rings twice, it's probably bad things are happening. I might need to take it. So, yeah, so, you know, we would really like to see a bigger platform there because there's more use that we could get out of cahoots. One of the things that happens with our relationship with cahoots previously was cahoots was unable to fulfill even the basic requirements of the contract we had with them. They weren't fulfilling the hours that we were requiring service and some other things that were happening there. So down the road, will we see something like that enhanced and increased? I would hope so. Will it happen? I don't know. You know, there's a lot of economic factors that go into that and attracting individuals into cahoots as well, and livable wage and some other things that go on. So in a nutshell, that's cahoots. We still have the same relationship we had with them before, whether or not they're housing fire. We just felt, you know, citywide with the leaderships of both departments, we felt cahoots was a better fit within the fire department. And I think it's working. So crisis response. So one of the things that, and this is happening across the country, is that we are now embedding crisis workers in with police departments. And so what you will see predominantly is a QMHP, a qualified mental health professional, will embed with the police department and respond to police officer calls with a police officer. And they'll go on the calls where we have some type of a crisis event, someone needing some health services, mental health services. And it'll be the QMHP that'll take the primary lead on that, and they'll engage with the individuals in crisis with a police officer who's been specially trained as well. Just kind of there to support that operation. A good portion of the time, your QMHP and even your police officer wouldn't be in a standard uniform. They're wearing most of the time softer clothing. So that the presence of a officer in a uniform with a badge, which can be a trigger for individuals and it can escalate situations, we know this. It just creates a more soothing and calming environment. And what happens is your behavioral health individual, usually the QMHP, will take the lead on that, and they'll engage with those individuals to try to resolve those situations that we have on the street. What's happening right now is we have a relationship or a partnership with Lane County Mental Health, where we are going to assign a behavioral health responder into our downtown core. We've got a couple of contract hiccups going on because this is all centered through Lane County Mental Health. So there's some things going on there relationship wise, but we anticipate that position to be filled and up and running. And I believe October 1st is either the first iteration or it's the second iteration. And what I mean by the second iteration is we've just been awarded some grant funding to fund a second behavioral health response team. And so what we'll see is a second qualified mental health professional attached to the downtown core and attached to our downtown team to respond to behavioral health issues predominantly in our downtown core. So I believe that it's either July 1 on the 1st and October 1st on the 2nd, or the first one's October 1st. Please don't hold me to date. This is really Chief Skinner's world. He's done some amazing work spinning this up off the ground. I can tell you, having previous experience in another agency with this, that it is it's a game changer. It really is. To have somebody that's specially trained to be able to be there right on scene with individuals that are experiencing crisis, it really is an impactful deal. And some of the things that we've seen where we take police officers and we put them in situations that they're not hired or selected or trained for, and this isn't their area of expertise, and then we place them into situations where individuals are experiencing severe mental health episodes. That's a combustible event. And when you look across the country and you see some of these force events could have been avoided had we had a program like this in place, or those agencies did, because you can divert away from the police officer trying to resolve what is a mental health situation, which, you know, I think we're very exceptionally well trained, but we're not trained to the level of the QMHP. And, you know, and it's just, that's not how we're hiring or selecting officers. That's not what we're selecting for. So coming soon to a downtown neighborhood near you, we're going to see mental health professionals on the street working with our police officers. And the ultimate goal would be, obviously, we would want to push a program like this citywide and probably countywide, because the county would be the portal through any of the funding. So
does that mean the person wouldn't go outside the downtown corridor if they were requested to? Or they're stationed down here, but if there was a need out Highway 99, they would go?
the primary focus area will be into the downtown core.
Okay.
Could that mean that they could go outside the downtown core? Yes, but in limited circumstances, just simply because of the nature of the funding and the grant that we have and how we identified it.
A couple questions. What is the downtown core? Where is it a line?
Yeah, there is. There's a downtown activity zone. It's called the DAZ.
Mhm.
And I apologize, I could not tell you. Maybe Ryan, you could tell us what the geography areas are.
No, it's fine.
I think
I mean,
it's the
does
same
it-
place that the dogs can't go.
Okay,
Yeah,
so not like
yeah.
the Whitaker, it's more like,
Yeah, I think it's 6th to 13th, and I don't know the Easton one.
Yeah, I
it's when like the camping was prohibited, it's that.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right,
Okay.
I think Franklin.
How will you, so that person will just be like on patrol?
Yep.
Okay,
They're going to be doing their own thing. They will call officers. Officers may go and walk along with them. That could happen. A whole variety of things could happen. As we spin this program up even further, we're going to learn some things as we go.
Mhm.
And we're going to figure out this works, this doesn't work, this works really good. And so as we get along in the program, we're going to learn a lot about how we're responding. And really think it's gonna make a difference now.
Will they always be with an officer or
Always.
not always, but they
Yeah,
can call an
they can
officer
call,
with you
yeah.
there? So this is different than cahoots in that this person with the officer could approach someone who seems dangerous, because I know that's something with cahoots that
Correct.
is people in town, I don't know if you think they understand that, like, if you call cahoots, but there's like a threat of violence in there, cahoots isn't gonna go.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
So this is kind of an extension of cahoots, like the next level,
Next level, yes, to some degree.
without like
Yep.
escalating it all the way to armed
Correct.
uniformed officers showing up.
Correct.
Yeah,
And one of the other nice things about this is that our QMHPs that we're gonna have in this program could also be handling casework. So in times when they're not making contacts or doing different things, they could have some case files, and then they could be making home visits, they could be making, maybe we know somebody that stays on the street in one certain location, we always know where to find them. They could be doing check-ins with those individuals. So there's a lot of things that will spin out of this program that are very, very top quality.
and then I imagine that they're going to partner closely with places downtown that are also doing this sort of work. Like the dining room for Lane County, like those kind of things that are reaching these people who are often in crisis
Yes.
to build relationships. and-
So, and that's multi-tiered because our downtown officers are also trying to do the same thing.
Mhm.
So we're trying to have a presence, not in the enforcement capacity like we would normally think, but we're trying to have a presence there. So we know who is in the downtown core, who's coming and going. And really try to build some relationships there to have a little bit of a different response mechanism. So I think it all co-mingles, co-joins, co-responder, as we've called it. So
Mhm.
So sorry, I wanna check an assumption that I've got. So if there was a call of someone who's apparently in a mental health crisis, and they appeared to have a knife. Is this something that,
So, yeah, let's talk about that for a second, because it's all nuanced,
wonder.
right?
Yeah.
So a person on the street with a knife, they're armed in any way, then your police officer is gonna respond and become the primary of that with your QMHP is like your backup.
Okay.
So think of your police officer in those situations, kind of like as your bodyguard for your QMHP, for lack of a better term. The police officer is gonna be there to protect and safeguard the QMHP. The QMHP is the tool to resolve the situation.
What city is this gonna be modeled on, or?
Ours doesn't have a specific model. There's a couple of models throughout the country. So there's really two models throughout the country. So you have a QMHP paired with a police officer and they do it. Or you have the cahoots model where you have a QMHP paired with a paramedic or a medic of some kind. So we can have the both now because we have the cahoots with a crisis worker and a medic. And now we're gonna have a crisis worker with a police officer. So across the country, there's some variation in these programs. But by and large, that's what it is. The co-responder model would be QMHP with either police or QMHP with fire.
And I'm guessing this is beyond what you were prepared to talk about, and it probably is a question for the chief. But what are the requirements with regards to the grant? And what information we're sending back to them? Is it just like numbers? Are there boxes that are being checked of these are the kinds of things that we were dealing with? Or, I mean, grants always have requirements.
Yep. So how we're reporting back on this grant, I am not sure.
Okay.
Our grant is being portaled through Lane County Mental Health.
Okay.
So the likelihood is they're gonna have to be the catalyst for our grant reporting. Now, what that would look like, I don't know. Clary Booz, who's our strategic initiatives manager, who's been doing all this grant work, would be the best person to answer that question, and I can get it to you guys through the.
And since it's through Lane County, is Eugene the only one doing it, or is Springfield doing one as well?
Eugene,
Does Cahoots go to Springfield?
yes, they do.
Okay.
sorry,
Sorry, people probably have questions.
no, sorry, and I'm sure. If any of y'all do know that this is, I have other times that I can ask questions, so you should.
I have a question about the connection between the community and all three entities. The mental health that's working with the police, mental health is working with GOES and the police officer. Someone has to make that decision about who to call, and it usually has to be a 911 operator.
Mhm.
Are they given criteria for making those assignments, or do they have to figure that out themselves?
So this is a great question, because when I first heard this program, this is the very first question I asked is how we're gonna triage some of this stuff.
Yeah,
So as it stands right now, our QMHPs are not responders to 911 calls. So it would be our police officers that are monitoring 911, and they would be the ones to say, hey, we probably had to get a QMHP over here, or maybe, this is what we're looking at. So that's the way it's configured right now. Could we have an advancement of that or a change in that? Sure, we could, and I think we could envision a time where I can envision a time where we have a QMHP in a police car with a police officer, and they're going all throughout the city and into the county, even try to resolve these situations. I can see that. But right now, we're focused just solely, the idea kind of really is to get a little bit of a foothold into this downtown. We're gonna trial, it's more than a trial, but we're gonna trial the program into our downtown core. And then use that as a catalyst for us to say, we've had success here. We need to take it broader base in the community.
Just for our purposes, since we not often, but we do get complaints about codes that we can't move forward on because you're not EPD employees.
Mhm.
The mental health professional will be a county employee or an EPD employee?
County employee.
Ooh, okay, no complaints.
And it'll be somebody assigned to this job. It won't be like on Monday it's Bobby and on Tuesday it's me.
It's one specific person.
I wanted to keep note of my names, but-
Oh, that's a great question though, because you have to have the continuity of the same person into the area. Because what we really want to do is build relationships with the people that are having, and if you're constantly looking at different people, you're not gonna get that.
Is there interest from these
Yes, there is.
QMHP
Yes, there is.
employees? Okay.
Yeah, there is.
Wait, there already are some QMHP employees? Or what's the criteria, I guess, to be one?
Yeah, so that one I'll have to defer over to
Okay.
Wayne County, qualified mental health professional. I don't know what gets you to that certification. I can tell you that there is somebody that has been selected for this position, so
Oh,
we're just waiting to resolve all the issues as far as our contracting goes and our funding, and then get everything lined up, and then. The very things that we're talking about, how are we gonna do this in responding? What are some of the criteria we're gonna put in place? Cause we're looking at policy directives, procedures, there's things that we're gonna have to still work through. So it's gonna be a little bit before we're gonna get this person live on the street, but we have a person.
by summer,
great idea.
by warm weather
Sorry, I have lots of questions.
Wow.
Okay. Body worn cameras. Health professional is not gonna be wearing a body worn camera, obviously, when they are.
time.
No.
Why is that not, why is that obvious? They're not going to.
Sorry,
They're-
because my doctor doesn't wear one.
Well, right, but your doctor also isn't working on the streets in downtown
Yeah,
Eugene
they're-
and as a,
They're not an employee of
Yeah.
the city of Eugene, so,
Okay.
yeah.
but that doesn't mean that city of Eugene can't ask that they have one, right?
I would say they're having health conversations since it's recording. themselves.
Okay, yeah, from that perspective, you're right.
I think HIPAA's gonna kick in on that, and,
Yeah.
Okay.
The likelihood is if we're into something that's deep, we have a police officer right there with them,
Got it.
their body camera.
Okay, so the body cams will be on for police officers.
Sure,
Even though it's.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that's HIPAA information's a standard redaction
Yeah,
for
yeah.
us, so.
Okay,
I thought you said that the QMHP and the officer with them would not be in uniform. Did I misunderstand that?
Officer being uniform.
Okay.
Yeah.
Including body worn cam,
Including body worn camera.
and it will be on.
Yes,
So you mentioned it was one person, what hours and days would they be working?
I don't know yet. I think we still need to work that out.
Is there like a high risk period, like nighttime?
Actually, I think it's more in the daytime.
Okay.
So what we find is, yeah, we see a lot of crisis in the downtown core during the daytime. Now, the reality of it is, we're probably also seeing it at night, but there's less people downtown, so it's not as acute and in our faces. But the likelihood is we're gonna be there during the daytime hours. Where and when, I don't know. We're still working on that. Chief Skinner may have had that worked out already, but that part I don't know.
And the hope is that if you can support them during the day, then they'll be somewhere safe during the night, like.
The hope is, yeah,
And eventually we'll have people working shifts, so that it'll-
ideally.
And hopefully there will be a press release about this.
Oh, yeah.
So the city knows this is happening and they go Yay,
We-
Eugene.
We've already pushed a press release out on this, just kind of high leveling the whole co-responder model, what we're trying to accomplish. So there is already information that's been pushed out citywide in this. As we get closer, of course, we're gonna wanna parade this around pretty good. I mean, it's a good program and it's good for the city. It's good for the individuals we're encountering. It's one of those we're gonna wanna talk about, because we're proud of it.
Yeah, I mean, I see the backlash will be. Why aren't we just arresting them and sending them to jail? Why are we coddling them? Why are we putting another service agency in here to attract more? I mean, I'm not
That's
saying
one
I.
side of the backlash. I'm sure there'll be
Right,
others.
I'm
So
not,
there-
oh, absolutely, I think there will be a lot of people that will support it, but I think there's always that, that optic that people think, cahoots is just, we're bringing homeless people here because we have so many service agencies to help them. I don't agree with that perspective, but I'm just saying that it's like,
The reality of the situation is the individuals that we would be talking to and dealing with that are in crisis, they're non-criminal events. So we're actually bringing a tool in to try to help and resolve some situations that we're seeing. Because these are not, we're not gonna arrest our way out of this. It's just, there's no enforcement angle.
This is not a question, this is a statement of support. So I'll talk more about it, but I went to the national conference for civilian oversight last month and was talking to a lot of folks. A lot of folks had questions about cahoots. And so it was interesting to talk about both cahoots and this model that's upcoming and the merits of each because one of the complaints, one of the most frequent complaints we get about cahoots is that we called for cahoots in the cop skin. Because there was a dangerous element there that cahoots wasn't appropriate. And so I think this is one of those, having like an almost intermediate option, I think is gonna be really, really beneficial for the community. And it was interesting to hear other people's jealousy of all the things we're doing. So I'll talk more about that later.
Are there any other questions?
Can I make one comment?
Great idea.
So Bernadette, you had asked about other like national models. So the Police Executive Research Forum put out a report in October of this year that goes through like these different types of models, and then it gives like specific city examples. So anyway, if you want to
I have it on my
more,
desk if you want.
just
okay.
for fun.
okay,
Yeah, so then we will have like two of like, I think the three models that were identified.
thanks. Have we checked online to see if there's any members that?
Ellen's here. Ellen, did you have any questions?
I do not. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Chief. Appreciate it.
I'm gonna have Lindsay just do this training next time, because she's very well read, obviously.
Well, thank you. You did a great job you did a great job. Even,
Regardless of
yes, thank you.
preparedness.
Trying to qualify your good job.
Yeah.
Okay,
The chief.
For
chief
just
pre-
being a deputy chief, he
He
did a good
prepares
job.
me well.
before we head to break, I want to give Ellen the chance to provide comments, because
Opening.
you're right here. I always forget.
Thank you. Sorry, I just had a heck of a time joining this meeting and it probably was on my end. I apologize. No, I was good with the minutes, and the police commission did meet once since in the month that we took off, and we got the hate and bias report and had a spirited discussion about certain communities and what's being done and what could be done. And it was clearly the start of a conversation, not the end of one. But that was the police commission's business. And sorry I can't be with you all this evening, but I'm glad to be on the meeting. So thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Also, we decided to table the minutes from October until next time, when we have more people who are here. So you'll be approving it later.
All right. Okay.
And now we can take a break.
Yeah.
10 minutes,
Terrible.
and we are back. Are we back? Back. All right, and it's to you, Rob.
All righty, here we go.
Let's dive right in.
Okay, so here's our case summary for today, and it's relating to an allegation of unnecessary use of force. So here are a summary of facts. On December 1st, 2022, Officer A responded to a call for service regarding a disorderly person. Officer A encountered an individual, we will call the individual suspect, and unsuccessfully attempted to converse with him or her. The suspect was verbally combative to Officer A. Officer A told the suspect that he or she did not wish to engage in a physical altercation. Officer C and Officer D approached the suspect, contacted him or her, and arrested him or her for criminal mischief 1 vandalism. And then prior to law enforcement contact, the suspect cut his or her hand and was bleeding. Sergeant E told the officers on the scene not to place the suspect inside a patrol vehicle until medical care was provided for his or her wound. So Officer A assisted with custody of the suspect on the sidewalk. Officer A told the suspect that he or she had some yuckiness on him or her. The suspect became agitated, called Officer A an expletive, and attempted to kick him or her. Officer A attempted to dissuade the suspect's actions. Officer A told the suspect if he or she did not stop, then he or she, Officer A, would hurt his or her leg. The suspect continued and raised his or her leg. Officer A then struck the suspect in his or her leg with flashlight. In the IA interview, Officer A stated that he or she did not intend to cause harm to the suspect, tried to stop the kick attempts, and defended his or her actions. So we have one allegation, and it's from use of force, that Officer A used force in excess of that, which was reasonable, under the circumstances when he or she used his or her flashlight as an impact weapon to strike a suspect detained in handcuffs. And so for the adjudication recommendation, so the auditor recommendation was sustained, the chain of command, and it was concurred all the way through, it was within policy, and the chief also was within policy. So our issues for the CRB discussion was a currently generated complaint relating to use of force. And then I will not read all of that. And then here are the materials that we've provided for you that we normally provide. And then for 2024, I'm gonna take a better picture of it straight. I said that before, but I'm really gonna do it. That's my New Year's resolution.
At least it's the right place.
I know, I flashed the wrong one up a couple of times. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing. You guys can take it away.
All right. We will just go around and share our thoughts. We'll start with complaint, intake, classification, and monitoring. You started with a comment. Bernadette, could you start?
Well, this is probably the first time I've had a lot of conversation about this with myself. So there was a conversation between the officer and a sergeant, and there was a concern whether or not that foreclosed the auditor doing an investigation.
There was an objection, yes.
There was an objection, okay. And what's the objection based on? Is there something in the protocols that says?
Not in the protocol. So basically, it's just an employment law issue where if you've already been coached or disciplined, received corrective action for an incident, then sort of it's viewed as sort of that's taken care of. And so a future IA, it has nothing to do with the auditor's office or anything like that. It's just an IA then, after that coaching has already taken place is viewed as like double jeopardy, basically.
As opposed to, there's state court and federal court,
Right.
and we're the federal court.
I like this, yeah.
So I guess my question then is, when the sergeant is having the conversation,
Mhm.
had the IA, the IA had not taken place yet.
Correct, so.
And was the conversation, was part of that conversation or the outcome of that conversation, did it play into the decision to go forward with the IA?
No, so, and Lindsay and Rob, feel free to weigh in on this, because this is one where we all, were working. But so basically the IA came into being, Because we were doing a review of the use of force. And because there was a documented use of force, we review every single one. We had an issue with the use of force, and so we opened the IA. We did not know at that time that the acting sergeant had spoken with the employee about the issue, and had some comments in the performance evaluation about the same issue. I don't know that it would have changed anything. I don't think it would have.
And then with regards to the classification,
Mhm.
by the time you get the chief's evaluation,
The adjudication,
at that point, it's too late to add an allegation
correct.
by you. Is the chief able, though, based on everything he reviews, to say, I find that the use of force was within policy, but and the reason I'm asking the question is because right after the chief says within policy, even though I concur with the chain of command, I feel compelled that this memorandum of the officer exercised poor decision-making and tactical judgment, which led to the force of application. And usually we say judgment is kind of a, I don't know, it's kind of a piling on or a catch-all. And it's like, to me, it's like, this seemed like the perfect opportunity for the chief to say, this is a judgment that really should be sustained.
Right, so that's a good question. In my experience, we've had what I remember as. We've had complaints allegations be dismissed at this stage. We had them be adjudicated at this stage. If you want to add an allegation at any point, then you have to do notice and an opportunity to be heard, right? There needs to be due process for the attorney, for the officer, sorry. So, I mean, like hypothetically, I've not seen it happen before. There would definitely be objections about it, but as long as there was hey, I think this is what we need to do. I think hypothetically, like we could do a reopening, add an allegation, give the officer an opportunity to be interviewed, all of that stuff. I've never seen it happen before.
If I may, Leah.
Yeah,
The problem with this is we've already interviewed the employee, and because we've gained this information out of the interview and we put it, and now we have a judgment. If we reopened it, we can't go back and re-interview, and we can't use the statements from that interview because he wasn't noticed for the judgment. And so when we're interviewing, he's not been noticed for the judgment, we can't. Now, the only time that could change is if I'm in an interview and I'm in an IA interview, and in the middle of the IA interview, truthfulness is a good example. So I'm in an IA interview and all of a sudden somebody says something and I know it's not true. At that point, you stop the interview, you come back away from it, you re-notice the employee for truthfulness, and you haven't continued the.
And we've seen that before.
Yeah, we do that with insubordination.
So, it's to add one after the fact, we would not win that in an Ebony or Herb hearing simply because we did not notice before the interview, we gained the information out of it.
I mean,
So then, Bernadette, can I jump on this? Why didn't you think of judgment as the classification or an allegation at the beginning?
well,
Is
because
that
20
fair?
hindsight is 20/20, number one. But no, I mean, I think that is really good feedback. I think that's kind of the issue in every single case, right? Is I do my best at the outset to look at really what I'm worried about. And what I was worried about here was hitting someone with a flashlight when he had handcuffs on. Like, honestly, and as you can see, like, our office was never convinced that it was within policy or it was okay. So it wasn't, to me, it wasn't a judgment call. It was excessive force.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think my final comment is just that it, to me, as much as we have harped on, don't pile on.
Right.
It makes me think, well, not pile on, but I mean, it makes me think that it's like every time there's something that the officer is doing, we're questioning their judgment.
Yeah.
And it's like, most of the time we would say, don't put that allegation in there. But it almost seems like in this for me, at least in this particular situation, it's like this really was, it came down to judgment. And based on the chief's, own, adjudication memo, I think he believed it was a judgment error as well.
Mhm.
And while I appreciate the perspective that it's not gonna hold up. Sometimes you do, I guess I wrote down lawful but awful. It's kind of like, okay, it's like in this particular case, it's I don't like that phrase also that was used. It's like. If it's gonna end up being lawful but awful, it's like, well, then I think, we put a judgment in there and it's like, oh, it might be awful that it goes away at the end, but I think it makes a point. But maybe that's being petty and vindictive and I don't know, and that's not really my position to decide those sorts of things. But it's just how I felt after reading that.
If I could take a minute and just respond to that, and Bernadette, I authored that memo.
Oh.
And the reason why that language is in there is very intentional on my part. Because can we, as I'm reviewing this, can we go back and add this, no, we can't.
Okay.
But can we memorialize it in a memorandum so that it's there for us at a later date? Yes, we can, which is what the intent was there. And the secondary part of that was, there's a training component of this. So decision-making and forced decision-making all comes back and it goes directly to, what have you been trained on and what's the decision-making? Part and parcel in this was, it's the decision-making ahead of the actual strike that is concerning, because there's options that you could have taken in advance. And that's where the decision-making comes into play. Hear you loud and clear and
Yeah.
lawful and awful,
Right.
Yeah.
And I appreciate, I really did appreciate the memo because I thought it really did lay out an awful lot, which I'll go into later on, but it struck me as, why, and I'm sorry that I didn't recognize that you were the only.
No, it's
Same
okay.
on me.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think, honestly, in any use of force that we open up, I'm probably considering use of force, I'm considering de-escalation, I'm considering judgment, often performance, like.
Right.
There's like the list in my head and I just try to find the one that I think is best, and it is predicting the future, it's inexact. I've had a lot of practice, but I'm not perfect.
Oh, no, right. I think it's the first time that I've ever seen something that I wish we had put in there.
Yeah.
Only because when you get to the end and you read that, it's why, but
I would love, just while we're talking, side note, I would like, one of the things I've been floating is if there were ever a way to do sort of an intermediary thing where it's a, hey, I have questions about like, what was your thought process on this night of this contact? Like, what would be sufficient notice to just be able to have that conversation?
Mm.
Because often I end up in a situation where I have questions and the only avenue I have to ask those questions is this process.
right.
But anyway, sorry, I don't. Okay, Rick, I'm talking over your turn.
No, no worries. I have no comment. Thank you.
Alan,
Thank you. On intake, classification, investigation, and monitoring, just point out that a couple of good things happened, that maybe the sergeant had a judgment thing by choosing to counsel instead of instead of escalating it or bringing it to IA, but at least it was recognized as something that needed to get a use of force report filed, even though it was a very quick action and a little whack and it was over. And so to me, it's heartening that then the auditor picks it up and says this is something worth having a full investigation. So on the topic of this round, those are my comments. Thank you.
all right, Alan, can you still hear us? I might have pushed our mute button on the owl.
I can still hear you. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad you're there too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I kind of had the same questions as Bernadette about the follow-up and having this kind of be in a weird order. And that kind of like not necessarily connected to this case raised a little red flag in my mind of like, if this is something that we're gonna say is okay, then for something that's like more serious or something that would have been sustained, that would undermine the auditor, undermine the, what is this whole thing called?
Police oversight.
Police oversight. Yes, thank you, Bernadette. It would undermine that whole system if all of a sudden supervisors could be like, no, you're cool, you're cool.
Yeah, I will say, I think it's a not infrequent tension, I guess, between, and we talk about this when we go to supervisors trainings. About, well, you know, I want supervisors to be able to manage their teams. I want them to do team building. I want them to do coaching. I want them to be doing their job as supervisors. And,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna do my job too, you know, and it's just, it's sort of an inherent area where we can rub up against each other sometime, and that's okay.
Mhm. Yeah. How often do we get that objection in the interviews?
Ooh, not, no, I mean, I think I've probably had it. I don't know, maybe less than half of the times in my.
And you just kind of note objection and move on and
Yeah, so
continue
if
your job.
there's an objection from the union in these questions, and often, like, there can be for timeliness, like the consent wasn't filed on, there can be this kind of thing, like. The union can object to questions, the officer still has to answer because they're compelled to ask the question from their employer. And then basically when that comes into play is if there's any discipline that results in a. What a monetary. Property right, then they go to arbitration, and then they would be like, well, we objected to this in the beginning, right? It's basically preserving the issue for appeal later. Okay. Lawyer, right, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. And then I don't really know where this comes in. I think it's monitoring. I think that the investigation was done really well, monitored well. I don't know how to say this. The officer who was being interviewed. Should have really thought about this ahead of time. I mean, I did, I've been thinking about it a lot, but I don't like the way that they come across. I think that they act like they're above the process. I thought that the response to the auditor's questions was disrespectful. And it seemed like a power play to belittle that question in the moment multiple times. I think that this officer approaches it with a bit of bravado and has maybe a superhero type complex. And that's what comes across in the interview. That's why I'm bringing it up here, I think, is because it's like an armchair quarterbacking the 2020 thing. They often, I mean, we've heard from this person before, and they often talk in a way that's, I'm out to save the community. I'm out to like make a difference, and you know, we're going to catch the bad guys, and they just have this bravado that I feel it's a little concerning that is something. They self-identified their age as being quite young. So
Yeah,
just a little concerning.
I think, I was struck by the disrespect for my team as well.
That's my comment on that part.
It's unfortunate because I really am proud of the work that is done. I feel like it's really fair, but it's also, it's fair and firm. You're not gonna let anything that shouldn't slide.
Yeah.
I think that's important. And that's really all I have to say on this part.
Okay, then we'll move on to the next part. Relevant department policies, practices, and policy training considerations to Rick.
Policy training. I don't think I have it. Yeah.
Alan.
Thank you. My comments on this topic are, I'm hesitant to say this because it seems contrary to my spirit, but there's a recurring theme in these cases, and it's every time the officer does something like nice, every time they they deviate a little from the process or the practice, kind of trying to get to be compassionate or give the person a break, it ends up creating trouble. And in this case, like not seating a visibly intoxicated, bleeding person down, apparently that was the thing to do, but it was wet, and they did, you know, the decision was made not to. It wouldn't have happened, and to not put the individual in the car because of the slight amount of blood, where apparently there was disagreement among the officers about that. But so anytime I want officers to be compassionate and deviate and stuff, but you know, when it's appropriate. But it also just seems to me to be a recurring theme that in an effort to be nice, something else happens always. And so maybe that, I don't know, you know, that's not a reason to be, I want discretion and not rigidity, but I just want to note that that does seem to happen. And then, uh, you know, it seemed punitive. And I guess when we get to the next round, that's, you know, what the discussion will be. And I'll address the comments in the memo at the next round. But so that's what I had for that. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, for practices, I have a couple things. In the interview, the officer said that the reason that they use the verbiage, "I will hurt your leg, I'll hurt you, I'll hit you, I'll hurt you," was that they had been trying to get compliance by saying it one way and then decided, I mean, they said this many times in the interview, but, and then I decided to use this other method. But watching the video, it was like 10 seconds. They said it like 2 times, like, "Don't kick me, don't kick me, I'm gonna hurt you." It wasn't like there wasn't a lot of thoughtful time to be like, "What I'm doing isn't working, so I will do this other thing." And that's kind of, I mean, that ties into what I said before about the bravado. I feel like they come to the interview with like their planned presentation of how I'm gonna get out of it. And then also, like, I don't understand, this is maybe a practice that you can answer. The blood and the injury on the hand that was not caused by the officer, that was already there. I want to make that clear for the public here, that the blood was from a prior injury. So a bloody hand with an injury on the hand in handcuffs seems painful. So I don't think that this person was like feeling pain, for a lack of better word. So I don't know why you would think like, "Oh, I'll just hurt you to get you to do what I want," when clearly like this is a tough person or there's something going on. Is there training or policy about that? Like if there's already an injury and
The only policy that potentially could apply would be if you have somebody that has a cast or something along those lines, then obviously you're gonna take some different steps. Really, when somebody presumably punches or fists through a window and cuts themselves, yeah, you probably want to put them in handcuffs right away.
right,
You're covering their wrists ultimately, so their hands.
yeah, right.
You know, and
But like they weren't complaining about like my hand hurts, which I would be if I had punched a window. Like, I don't know. I don't really even know if what I'm asking needs an answer, but I do want an answer about this one. It seemed like there's a lot of conversation about why they didn't put them in the squad car. Like that seems really dumb to not.
so, yeah, you know, really dumb's probably the right word.
Okay,
I mean, there's hardened seats in those cars. They're designed that way so you can disinfect and wipe them out.
right.
Do we want to put bodily fluids in our cars? No, but there's a balance there. I mean, when you have somebody out and they're potentially violent and they're cut, yeah, put them in a car.
Especially like with what Alan was talking about with like, it wasn't a viable option to have them sit on the slushy sidewalk.
Put them in
Like,
a car.
we can respect that and put
Yeah.
them in the car.
You know, it just, you know, and it's unfortunate that we had a sergeant that made that decision and, you know, it ended up precipitating kind of some of the things that happened.
Right. Was there any follow-up with that sergeant about that choice? Do you know?
Yes.
Okay.
But the way I understood what the sergeant said was basically, it was make sure the bleeding has stopped before they're put in the car. It is how I heard it. And I didn't see either officer that was holding this person on the street was looking to see, it's like, other than they saw that there was blood there,
Mhm.
so they were gloving up. But there wasn't any indication that they even looked to see, it's like, is it bleeding? Is it dripping? There was no.
One guy looked at it for quite a while.
Oh, I was gonna say, maybe I missed that one, because it was like the ones I was looking at, it was like, they were just standing there holding this person up. And, you know, and then during the interview, they're kind of bemoaning they took away my one tool that I wanted, and it was just like, but in my opinion, there were other tools. I mean, it was like, when you're walking the person, they're not kicking at you. So,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm interrupting, but I didn't get the feeling that it was that as hard and fast as it seemed to have been interpreted by the officers of, don't put them in the car. And there wasn't any further follow-up conversation. It was just like, I would think, yes, okay, maybe the sergeant, maybe they felt like that's what the sergeant was saying. Don't put them in the car as long as the person's bleeding. But as soon as they start kicking or agitated, if they were pulling away, if they were trying to run away, obviously that would open the conversation back up to say, hey, Sarge, we got these other things going on. Can we, so.
I agree.
Anyway, I talked out of turn.
That's okay. The other thing I want to add is that I thought that Officer A did a really, really nice job with the suspect. After the kicking, I thought that they were doing a lot of nice talking and de-escalating, and it seemed respectful, and that was good.
So I don't know if this is best for adjudication or, but just since you mentioned the comment about hurt you, I will talk about that now. It was interesting to hear that the statement coming from an officer, just that, like, not, I'm gonna tease you, I'm gonna tackle you or whatever, like, I'm gonna hurt you. That seemed pretty cruel and not ideal. I also then, it seems ridiculous for him to say that he did not mean to cause him harm, and he literally said, I'm going to hurt you. That was just, I mean, I don't know. You did say there was disrespect in the, you acknowledge that there was disrespect in the interview, so perhaps all of his answers were not going to be fabulous. And that we're talking about policy, this might be an adjudication piece, but I don't understand how this is within policy, and obviously the auditor did not agree. And it feels like that perhaps the chain of command, and I know you wrote the memo, might, this is what it feels like, so you can tell me that it's not the case, that they might have just, because this wasn't too egregious, he didn't really hurt him, that they just decided to give it some kind of adjudication, because, I mean, you couldn't have said unfounded, sure, but it doesn't seem like it's within policy, so maybe there needed to be another one, like, maybe it wasn't within policy, but we don't think it was that serious. That's what it really seems.
I have a bigger bit, well, are we talking about adjudication?
Not quite yet.
Okay. Some places have a lot more categories.
Okay.
That's just a quick overview.
Did you want an answer, or did you?
I don't, if how I feel is fine.
Yeah, I'll have the answer, but it might be best just to hold that to, with your adjudication, because I think there's gonna be some strong discussion on this.
Do you want to save all your comments to put them in?
Sure, I think it just makes sense. I don't
I
wanna,
agree.
I wanna hear from the board
Okay,
and then, be able to respond.
fair enough. Burn it up.
So. I'm sure Leah will remember the case of the officer that was walking over in the wit near Sweet Life down one of the alleys, and they had a hold of somebody, and did the person bit their hand?
Washington Jefferson Park.
Okay, but they bit their hand, and the officer like just kind of swatted. I mean, it was definitely a knee-jerk reaction. And the difference between that interview and this interview is so stark, because it was like that officer, it was clearly a response. I mean, it was just like, if you get hit by, get stung by a bee, you go ouch and you brush away, it's like, and getting bit, it's like, it just was that kind of response. And yet I think that officer was found to have violated policy. And it was, and I'm sure obviously everything, down after being found, was how it was then adjudicated, or what happened after the adjudication was probably at more of a counseling sort of thing, documentation, as opposed to any kind of, real egregious, writing up in their file, whatever. I don't know. But this one, it was like, I guess it just seemed so, thoughtful because of the words. And I think, yes, what Carolyn's saying, as far as not taking any time to, try anything else to, you know, divert the attention away from, you know, the kicking and just, you know, just like, yeah, I mean, if they had just said, oh, hey, we need to walk you over here and walk 3 feet. I think the person's whole thought process would have like, oh, I was kicking someone. I mean, would have completely forgotten it. And so I just, you know, I think the tools sorts of things, you know, I think there were lots of tools still available, not just the one in the car. And I think, I'm guessing policy says, yeah, use all your tools, but don't get super focused on one that you kind of forget you've got some other ones.
Within policy.
What? It was within policy.
Oh, that one was,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so the same adjudication.
Okay, yeah. Definitely a different opinion. The contriteness of during the whole process was completely different.
Okay.
The recognition of, you know, what had just happened, and apologetic in the moment, as opposed to in, what was this, interview number 3 was not, I mean, I think there was an indication by the sergeant that in interview number 2, it went better. I don't know if anybody listened to that interview, but in that one, there was. I'm not, that the sergeant said that the person seemed more receptive the second time around. But then I think during the interview with Sergeant Nelson, Lieutenant Nelson, it certainly that I think they the ability to be receptive was no longer there.
We recommended within policy on that one too.
Oh, okay, good.
All right, Alan, could you please start us with adjudication recommendations discussion? So we're gonna discuss it and then we'll say our agreements.
When
Yeah.
do we want DC? Don't we have a time for?
We will do our discussion of the adjudication. And then we can get a response and then we'll share our official vote. So to speak.
I like to reiterate our thanks for someone being here to talk about it.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, thank you. I really have 2 points to make. One is like, as someone who has spent over 15 years making low-level decisions, presiding over the kiddie table of justice of violations, traffic and dogs and all those things like that. The lawful but awful, this is a little bit of that kind of comment. It's when a decision maker like a judge or a chief or a deputy chief says it's within policy or you're guilty, but I really want to point out, you know, that there was conduct here that every time, like, I can't say that it applies. This will probably drive Rick crazy to hear this, you know, not surprise him that it's coming from me. But when I find myself in that but moment saying, you know, you're guilty, but, you know, they really behave poorly, or they should have done things differently, or, you know, and it's so close. I find that I really have to take a step back and look and see, like, why am I feeling that and what happened here? And here the whole thing from all the different video angles and the listening to it was punitive. It was not to me, the question, this is part 2. Simply the question is this legitimate defense of self or others? You know, and it to me was not, and that was, I thought, evident, and probably that was the conclusion of the auditor as well, and for whatever other reasons that they made their decision. But so those are the 2 that, you know, it's kind of like, I guess it touches back to, I wish it could have been something, and I heard that sentiment expressed around the table for sure. And so I think just, you know, when I see that, I appreciate the reasons that DC Adams just gave us earlier in the meeting for telling us why that was included and that it's there and now it's memorialized, and if it comes up again, you know, it wasn't part of an adjudication. But so I understand that and appreciate that's the reason. And so that's it. And yeah, thank you for listening.
Oh, my turn. I don't think that I really have anything to say, except just the idea of using the right tool for the job. If this subject had been tased while handcuffed, we would be like, obviously that was a extreme situation or extreme choice to do that. And I think this isn't that far off. Watching the video, this person was not a big danger. The kick was not particularly scary. From what I could tell, like if my toddler, when they were toddlers, were hitting me, I would be like, stop hitting me, but I wouldn't be like, stop hitting me, and then like hit them back with a flashlight. I'm really going off topic
You
here.
just like restrain their legs or something.
Yeah, I feel like that the hitting with a flashlight was not the right tool for the job in this situation. And the level of force was unwarranted.
I agree. I felt like it was an excessive use of force. I also agreed with Alan when he said that it was not a legitimate defense of self or anyone else. It was, as you said, not. The kick wasn't too serious. This also, as I have been on this board, I'm learning that it's a frequent thing that happens to police officers, that they're constantly being kicked out. And they have to figure out ways how to respond to that in the moment to get them to stop and also get them to comply and move on from the scene and whatnot. And different officers respond differently. I don't like the way this officer responded. And you had said if the officer had tased the suspect while he was handcuffed, we would have issues with it. And I think the auditor did treat it somewhat similarly. Yeah, I think that's what I have to say.
I'll just say quickly, taser under the Ninth Circuit case law is a higher level use of force than flashlight or anything else. So I definitely would have looked at that worse.
Is a flashlight, I thought I'd heard, and this is not true, and maybe it's just in the head, but is using a flashlight, like what level of force is that?
So it is, I mean, it's a good question. They don't, so there used to be this force continuum. Yeah, they don't do that anymore. And so basically it's sort of like low level force, middle force, taser, and then deadly force, right?
Well, taser less than deadly, right?
Yeah, that's
That's
true. That's the continue.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing, is like a flashlight can be a low level of force. It sort of depends on how hard you hit, where you hit, the circumstances that you use it. If it's hitting the head really hard, that's deadly force, right? And I've actually had a deadly force case where we looked at a flashlight straight to the head, right? In this case, I think it's pretty low level, and still felt like too much. Obviously, in my analysis was too much. So.
I mean, if I punch somebody, that's gonna be a lot less deadly force than like if Adams does. I mean,
Don't sell yourself short.
I don't know.
Well,
I'm just saying, like,
I think if
They're
they're
not
gonna,
trained to punch people either, like, I think that's.
We got a different set of rules for you.
You don't have a punch at all.
I don't. And
This training is gonna be really.
it's gonna be punchy. Bring it
It's
back.
punchy.
I almost expected this to be I didn't realize I had the flashlight in my hand when I went to stop the kick towards me. I mean, I kind of was
Like
like,
you got the other one in your head.
well, right, but so I was kind of thinking, it's like, so how would that have been viewed? Well, obviously, there wouldn't have been the words, I'm going to hurt you. And I think, this officer's age, I think this officer's length of time on the force was very dismissive of the sergeant and anybody else's age and experience on the force. And then that came up again, of course, during the interview. I think where it was interesting to read the 3 memos, because in the first sergeant's memo, not you, because you're not a sergeant, the first sergeant's memo, it basically indicates that the reason that this was within policy, because the extent of the force that can be used to make an arrest or prevent escape from custody. And it's like, okay, well, the arrest has already been made. There wasn't any indication that the person was trying to escape. And then they can use it for self-defense from what the officer reasonably believes to be use of imminent use or imminent use of physical force while making or attempting to make an arrest. Okay, the arrest has already happened, or while preventing or attempting to prevent an escape. So again, it's like just using the sergeant's memo, it's like, well, that doesn't have anything to do with this case. This, maybe I'm reading it wrong, but it just seemed like the reason this sergeant came up with why this was within policy was not helpful at all, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It didn't really talk to the level of force, and the reason for the force. It's like, it listed it all out, and then it just kind of went off and went, oh, arrest or escape. And I'm like, but that didn't have anything to do with it. So that one wasn't very helpful. Obviously Lindsay's, and Adams. Those were the ones that, it's like I went back to, to read, and I appreciate the explanation as to why judgment wasn't on here. I wish judgment was on here. I think what the officer did was, it's the words coupled with the action that raised the concern for me. So. there we go. That's all I have.
I get a chance.
Yeah, you can turn now.
You ready, Alan?
I know, that was a
I
lot.
have nothing to say.
Mhm.
First of all, let me say that, I don't think, what I heard when I listened to the officer, when he was placed in that situation, first of all, he was the first one to contact this guy on the street. I don't think that the officer A knew exactly how to treat him, because he stayed across the street from him. And the others kind of encircled him while that contact was made, which was wise, I thought. So that they had that individual, so that that person really could not escape, and they didn't really confront that person, so that there was no interaction at that point. And I think the two officers across the street made the decision to put him in handcuffs, so that our officer, who's in question here, did not even with that. At that point, our officer is not even in the picture. The individual's being held by the two other officers. And someone comes up to Officer A and says, will you stand in for my guy who is a training officer and hold the suspect while I take him away or something. I don't know where they were going, but they were otherwise engaged. So our individual officer A is standing there holding the left arm of the person, of the suspect. He has no axe to grind with the guy. Without question, the first thing the guy does is call him an expletive, and then tries to kick him. They've taken away the option of putting him in the car. They've taken away the option of putting him on the ground, because there was apparently some humanitarian reason for not putting him on the ground, where he would have gotten his pants wet. And so he's left there with the person swearing at him and kicking at him. And he didn't say, I'm gonna hurt you. He said, I might hurt your leg. I'm gonna hurt your leg. And he didn't hurt his leg. There was no complaint about injury in any leg. But he was apparently effective enough to stop the guy from kicking him. To me, that's not unreasonable force. And to quibble about what it says in the rule that was quoted by the sergeant about what's reasonable and whether I think you're entitled to defend yourself no matter what. And a person who's in handcuffs can be just as dangerous as someone who's not in handcuffs. And the person is not hobbled or anything, so that they still have the use of their feet and legs. Well, admittedly, the person was probably drunk or a skunk and probably couldn't do too much damage to the officer. Why take the chance? There was no complaint made by like suspect about any pain or anything from being struck. There's just no harm there, and, to me, the officer A was put in a situation of not of his own choosing and being forced to deal with someone who was not being very nice to him, who should have been under control at the time, but was not, should have been contrite, but was not. I know some of you have a quarrel with how the officer acted during his interview. I think that's subject to dispute, but I won't go into that. I don't think that's necessary. He did gain the compliance necessary to get the guy under control and actually treated him pretty well after that. So I don't see that there any evil intent here on his part. No one can establish that, I don't believe. So I think that within policy is a proper adjudication.
It's your turn.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
I just-
It's Bernadette.
I just,
Again.
Rick, I think the reason I point out what the sergeant wrote and why it's concerning is because if that's the basis for saying that this is within policy, then I think that's what we have to use to say that it's within policy. I mean, that's their reasoning as to why this is in policy. And yes, I agree that there are other reasons that they can use force, but they're not justifying this officer's use of force on those other reasons.
But the sergeant's adjudication doesn't mean anything.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
I
I'm just explaining why it was a concern to me, because it's kind of like, I think this sergeant is saying that it's within policy, and the basis for what they're saying it was within policy is, I don't agree with it. But what DC Adams says as to why it's within policy is different. And so I agree with what you're saying there, though. Go ahead.
I guess I disagree with the idea of categorizing that this guy was intent on hurting this fellow, and that's not the case at all.
But the quote was, I'm gonna hurt your leg if you kick me.
No, that's not what I heard
That,
when I listened to it. It said,
oh,
it was kind of I'm gonna hurt your leg.
And that's, I mean, the leg belongs to him, so you, leg, I mean, it's all interchangeable to me.
yeah, I mean, is it a tone thing that you think it was? I mean, because the words were, I'm gonna
I'm gonna
hurt
hurt
your
your
leg.
leg.
Okay,
It's
right,
kind of a tone thing, yeah.
okay, so,
It's kind of
Hey,
you better stop that, you dumbass, or I'm gonna hurt you.
right,
It's kind of about how I read it.
as opposed to, I'm gonna hurt your leg.
No, no,
Right,
He would
okay.
have hurt him if he intended to hurt him.
Absolutely, okay, got it. I understand it.
Now,
Don't have to agree.
I just have to make sure I understood.
No, I would tell the board that when I first heard that we had struck somebody with a flashlight that was handcuffed, I had kind of a visceral reaction like I've heard from the board, like, whoa, wait a minute. But oddly enough, this case becomes very simple for both the chief and I. Because when you think about, we have interviews, we have things he said, things he could have done prior to the baton strike. All of that really is superfluous to the very moment at which he makes the baton strike. And that's how use of force is judged. And that's the Graham versus Connor, that's your Graham standards. That's the landmark Supreme Court ruling. And essentially what it says is the officer is lawfully there performing his duties. He can't leave. He's where he needs to be doing his job. The guy is in custody. He has no right whatsoever to assault that officer. He was warned. He tried to kick. He struck with the flashlight. That was the tool he had available to him at the time. And it was not malicious in the sense of the Graham standards is the actual verbiage in the Supreme Court ruling is sadistic in nature. And that's really, that comes right from Graham versus Connor. And there was nothing at all sadistic about what was done there by the officer. The proportionality of the force, it wasn't like he wound up and struck him multiple times. He struck down, blocked the blow, and ended the deal. So essentially, that's how we reach our adjudication. Was there things that could have been done differently in this situation? And I think my memo outlines it. I think there's things that could have been done prior to the use of force to mitigate the use of force before it occurred. But at the very moment of which force is applied, our adjudication is the officer's lawfully justified in doing what he did.
So your belief, or you work from the presumption, belief that EPD policy is that the Graham standard of use of force, if it's not sadistic in nature, is gonna be within policy?
No. So I'm merely making a point
Okay.
of how the force was applied, and it wasn't like he made multiple blows or
Right.
things that were
I
intended.
don't think anybody, yeah.
So there's a four-part test for Graham versus Connor, okay? What's the nature of the crime committed? What's the need to apprehend? What's the injury inflicted by the result of which? And was it proportional? So those are the basic four standards for Graham versus Connor. It all comes back to a reasonably objective standard, that's all codified in Graham versus Connor. So if we simply apply the four-part test, so the nature of the crime committed, low-level offense, so we wouldn't immediately be expecting to jump to some type of a higher level of force. The need to apprehend, he's already in custody. Do we have injury? No, there's no claim of injury here. In fact, nothing. And was the force proportional to what was applied? So in other words, if you're picking at me and I strike you with the flashlight, I think that's a pretty proportional response.
Okay. I mean, that's what I was thinking, but when you use the term sadistic in nature, it made me think, whoa, that seems
Yeah.
like a lot farther to get to. That we rarely would ever get there with the use of force, so, thanks.
Poor choice of words.
That's okay.
One thing that comes to mind is, because we've already commented, and I won't say this before, but, I don't know that it was proportional, and I'm like, let's pretend like we're at school and a student, I don't know, punches another student or whatever, he was being violent, so the Graham factor would be a little different, but they're not police officers. And then the student tries to kick back. Nobody would ever allow a teacher to kick a child, and maybe their child, this could be different. Let's pretend we're in college then. So I don't see a professor ever kicking a student back. I think the response would have been to control his legs, and I think that should be the goal, is not to lower down to their level, but to maintain decorum and roll them out.
But here would be the question for that situation. So how would we do that? We're standing there holding a guy in the middle of the night. I have a flashlight in my hand. I'm encumbered and he goes to kick me. Like, I mean, you're pretty limited in options. I could kick the other leg and sweep him and blow him to the ground. And that's going to be bad. I mean, you can disengage him, I guess. I mean, maybe at the point of the event, we could have maybe done something, but I'm not so sure they would be lower and less intrusive,
Yeah.
really, quite frankly. And we gotta, bear with me, but we gotta be careful about making a comparison of Graham standards, which apply and is applicable to police officers versus citizens, because we get out into this realm and now we're into, this is a lawful thing that we're here and we're doing our jobs. This over here becomes criminal when we start talking about these. So commingling those, we want to be very careful about and stay on just the task of, what do we expect our police officers to do and what are we asking them to do? And that's why, the Supreme Court ruled on, the Graham standards of reasonableness of our actions. And so it's really okay that we don't agree. My intent here is not, it's just to share, this is why we came to our decision making. And if I can part some type of wisdom to what I'm saying to the board as to how we determine force application grade. Respect everything you guys say, so.
I think it goes, if you were to take a situation where it's like the citizens would want something done differently, it's like, why didn't you just shoot the gun out of their hand? That's something that people will often say when, somebody's waving a gun around and the officer, there's an officer involved shooting and the person dies. And it's like, why didn't they just shoot the gun out of their hand? Well, because you can't do that, right? I mean,
It's not a reasonable expectation.
yeah, and so I think it's like in situations like this, it's a similar situation. It's like, yes, we can, I mean, we're here to review the whole thing. Which it's that fine line between reviewing it and being the armchair quarterback.
Right, I definitely feel like that. Like, I want to say, like, perhaps he could have
Yeah.
you
Right,
know?
but it's the conversation that they hear and take back to the department that is the most important part of the process, I think, because it is informing the police what the community standard is.
Mhm.
Because when they hear what we're saying about it, they take it back and they impart that to the officers so it can be used the next time they're out there. That's how I view it. I mean, they could tell me I'm completely wrong and I'd be like, okay, that wouldn't surprise me, but
May I ask a quick question at the risk of being,
Yes.
at the risk of being shouted down and off topic or whatever, but I watched A's video. I watched two other videos. I can't say that I saw the strike be defensive to a kick, like from the angles that I saw, and I'm just throwing out the question. Does anyone else like believe they watched a kick and a strike that was defensive to the kick, or we're not sure what we saw? And my point being only that I think it was punitive. I don't think it was sadistic. I think it was, here's a warning, I'm going to do something to hit you, and I hit you. But I could not tell from the video angles that I saw that it really was a defensive, but anyway, thank you. That's it.
Are we okay to move on and share?
Yeah, sorry, yes, but I wanna say one thing. Cause I'm on the board, just kidding. So I think it's, like, I fall into this a lot where I'm like, oh, but you could have done this, or you could have done this, or you could have done this. And then I have to remind myself that the standard I'm looking at is never what is the least intrusive thing you could have done, because that's not what we expect, right? The rules are that you do something that's reasonable. And so, and I think I'm actually arguing in your favor here, so let's mark this, but like, and to me, this wasn't reasonable, but I think that's one of the things that I appreciate about this process is that we can disagree. Because I look at it and I say, this is a person who is not at their strongest, and that could, yes, I believe no officer needs to be assaulted at work, 100% support that. This didn't feel like a necessarily reasonable danger as much as it was portrayed to me. And so that's kind of where it came down for me is, and again, I don't want anybody to get kicked at work, not me, not the teachers, not anybody, right? Not police officers. So I get that. So I guess I see, right? I see where the friction point is. Because again, it's like, yes, I mean, I think we would agree, like all the things that I wish had happened before this actual moment. And at that moment, was it reasonable? Was it not? We just fall on different sides of that. So.
And the standard is not what is reasonable to you or to
Right, it's
me
to a
or
reasonable
someone else,
officer.
a reasonable police officer.
Objectively reasonable.
Correctly,
Yes.
objectively,
Objective.
not, I wouldn't do it, or
Right.
she wouldn't do it, or he
Okay.
wouldn't do it, but
Yeah.
what objectively.
Yeah.
And I've taken at least 4 cases to trial in this county
Mhm.
involving, this is back in the 70s,
Like, don't take this.
where I defended the officer, and every time the jury came back and said he was reasonable,
Yeah,
and one of them was a gunshot.
yeah.
So I mean,
No, I think it's the objectively reasonable. It's not subjective. It's not to me, it's not to you, it's to the objectively reasonable officer. right?
Yeah, I've talked about how I have a problem with that. And so, because I'm not an officer and I'm asked to make comments on this,
Yeah.
and I don't have that kind of background, so I'm just going to give it from what I see, and I try to give it, like, I definitely try to to give a lot of grace where there can be. But all I am doing is observing things and making them, like,
Yeah.
that's all I can do,
Yeah.
is make it from my
Well,
subjective.
you
And
all
that's your
are
task.
naturally
That's what
in
you're-
difficult positions.
Right.
All of
which
you.
is what that's what we're called here to do,
Yes,
is to give our opinions. And
sit
it's,
in the uncomfortable
Right.
seat.
yeah. So,
Not literally, those are wonderful.
Yeah, there.
These aren't actions.
General.
Okay.
all right.
I will start. I cannot say that it was sustained, and I cannot say that it was within policy. I also agree that I wish there was something else. I suppose I would say it's insufficient evidence, because I don't think that it was the right choice to make. But it also didn't cause injury, and it I don't think sustained should be the thing.
Can you remind me the allegations?
The allegation,
Or the questions?
oh, okay, there's sustained. Which is the sustained.
Well, but I mean, what was the,
I get it right.
Oh,
Force in excess of what was reasonable under the circumstances.
Used force in excess of what was reasonable in the circumstances when they used their flashlight as an impact weapon to strike the suspect who was detained in handcuffs.
May I wanna, so the whole thing about other jurisdictions doing other things, like, there was one case where Mark just went not sustained, just sort
oh,
of.
right, I knew
went off,
that. Yeah.
Decided he was done with all the
Right.
standards.
So I think, I think that I would fall between, insufficient evidence and within policy.
Yeah.
That's where I would fall. And he's
Some
walking
people
away.
say-
I just like, was like on his
I know.
side.
He can still hear you.
Watch the recording later.
Yeah, no, I think that's my,
Yeah.
that's my ruling. My ruling.
Wow.
You're here.
Hello, Chair.
so. I guess I'm gonna ask this question also before I vote, because I think. Somewhat important, but like you believe that this was an excessive use of force
Yes.
today?
Yeah.
Right. Because I didn't want to vote for it if you didn't still believe that.
Oh, nothing has changed.
Okay. I agree with the auditor that that the allegation should have been sustained.
For asking, and clarifying. Not, I don't think it is, sorry.
I don't agree with the first sergeant's reasoning, but I do agree with the conclusion by that's laid out in Adam's report and that it's within policy.
I agree with within policy.
Ellen.
Yeah, I mean, DC Adams makes a really persuasive argument about what the specific allegation in response to it was, and I think that, hear that, DC Adams? You made a very persuasive argument. And I think I agree with the chair. And I really can't, I think it was something, I joined the camp that it's not acceptable behavior like what was done, and that a total pass is highly unsatisfactory. However, as to the specific allegation of excessive use of force using the factors, set forth, I can't pick a side, so I'm gonna do what the chair did and follow their lead. Thank you.
Thanks for saying it better than I did, Alan. Appreciate that. Okay. That sounded facetious, it wasn't. Okay, so we can now, my favorite part of the night, elect a new chair.
Nominate Jose.
It's not here.
Jose, and I will nominate Jose. What's that?
I was gonna say, should we wait until they're?
Oh, no.
I have consent from Jose
Okay.
to be nominated
Oh, you-
for
Good job.
chair.
Okay, there you go. I nominate Jose.
I did.
Second.
Oh, you said, no, I nominated him and then you said, I have permission to
Oh,
do it.
yeah.
So no, as soon as you said.
He
open-
seconded. We nominate.
Yeah,
him
okay.
collectively.
I vote in favor.
Oh,
anyone
is everybody else
else?
that wants it?
Yeah. Oh,
I vote yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Our minutes taker is gonna be us.
what?
Just-
The minutes taker
Yeah.
has been here.
Oh, that's
Get
why
that in the
Lindsay's
minutes.
over there, right? Few minutes.
Okay, then vice chair.
Clay?
I'm willing to be vice chair.
You're willing to be vice chair?
I'm willing to be vice chair. If nobody else is wanting.
and
to
that's
do this.
allowed.
Yeah, that's.
That is allowed.
Rick, did you want
I vote for it.
to nominate her?
I nominate Caroline.
I'll second that.
Alan, do
You
you
don't want it?
wanna
No, I don't.
nominate or vote?
Are we doing the-
I wanted to just ask if Monique was interested in it, and if she is, if they are, then I would be off wanting just to hear a response, not wanting to put you on the spot, but
Mm.
Say it out
She is not.
I'm
interested.
not.
Were
thank you for,
interested in chair?
I'm interested in the commission liaisons. I
Oh.
don't wanna
Oh,
step up
That's
to
like
Yeah,
next.
that's a good
That's-
step.
That's
That's
not
a-
tonight.
That's a
Yeah,
next
that's
step.
so
Okay.
then, yes, I vote in favor of Carolyn for vice chair.
No.
Okay. I
Cool.
think
So-
everybody needs to vote though.
Yeah.
Correct. Oh,
All in favor of Carolyn being vice chair?
I
Aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4. You
I don't,
abstaining?
do I vote on myself?
Yes,
Yes, we do.
unless you're in Rainier or
Aye.
Washington, and then you'll lose by one vote.
Okay,
Vice
so
Chair.
we have the same leadership, but I don't have to lead the meetings anymore. Okay, closing comments.
Auditor report.
No. Yes. I can't wait till he
In my
says it.
closing act as chair, I will eliminate the auditor, which would.
I thought, I just.
I mean, I write it out now for you guys, so I feel like it's sort of, if you have questions, then we can talk about them, but otherwise I'm just gonna natter on, and I don't know that we need that, so.
This one?
Yes, I sent you one.
Who's in your
It's in
packet?
your packet, Bernadette.
So they're on the top line.
I'm horrified, sorry. Yes, so, Rob and I went to the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement Conference in Chicago last month. That's why we didn't have a meeting. It was really, really good. I was, not to toot my own horn, I was on the annual conference committee. It was a really good conference. But it was really helpful. I think the organization has, grown up a lot as the field has grown up a lot. So the first day they had sort of oversight 101, but they also had a track just for execs, and that was really, really valuable. So it was just folks who were running their offices, and it was like group therapy all day long, and it was really wonderful. It was helpful. I really appreciated it. And then, I mean, I brought all I downloaded all the materials, so I have all the materials, but there were some really fascinating things just about what other jurisdictions were doing. I think when we were set up, we were really leading edge. I think we still do a whole lot of things right, especially for such a small jurisdiction with a small budget and you know, staying in the bounds of our charter. I think we do a really amazing job, and it's just really interesting to see what places like Chicago, like with all the money do. It's crazy.
They have 99 investigators in Chicago.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
do.
and they spend millions of dollars.
Oh, they
on
do, yeah.
18 cases.
Like,
Well, and it's crazy, and actually, like in
incredible.
Chicago, the civilians have oversight over, and I'm not advocating for this, it's just of interest. Civilians have oversight over all officer involved shootings, like complaints of officer sexual assault, like all of those are primarily investigated by civilians, which is
Like,
just.
Investigated by.
Yes.
Like they get to question the officers? I'd like to.
It's very interesting to learn about,
That's going to
Um,
retire in Chicago.
and there were,
There's no graft in Chicago.
Right.
What?
We'll work
I
on it.
don't know.
It's good pizza.
There's some dogs there. We'll talk. No, but no, I think, it was very interesting to hear how other folks do it. Yeah,
Wow.
like, just kind of mind blowing. It's, you know, every law enforcement agency is different and does things a little bit differently, but every oversight agency is very different as well. And so it was really fascinating. Got to talk to a lot of people, learn about how other people do things. There was a really interesting panel on what happens when you get fired for doing the right thing, which I can't imagine really another conference where that would be applicable, but it was helpful. And great. Oh, definitely. No, but it was just, it was really great. So I can, and if anyone has questions, I can share materials with you, or we can talk more. There is an online conference happening on Thursday and Friday of this week. So if you have interest, let me know. And next year's conference will be in Tucson in October. I've got to look at our budget numbers, but if anyone has interest, that is something that we used to send folks to every so often. So, let me know. Yeah.
I've never been to Tucson.
I have actually lied. Our complaints kept going up in October, went down a bit in November. We're gonna finish the year strong here. So we're just.
Everybody's
working on-
happy
oh,
right now.
One interesting thing that we're still obviously in 2023 and getting complaints, but one of the statistics that we're looking at is because we do such strong preliminary investigations now, we've actually sent fewer investigations over to EPD. Well, because Cindy and Rick give us all the information as soon as we ask for it. You're amazing and responsive and wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. Then we send fewer things over for supervisors to look at EPD. So it's been a very interesting transition as we are fully staffed and capable of looking at all of those things, how we can save staff time over there. And I'm gonna stop talking now because I am nattering.
Okay,
And we're not meeting in January. I saw that.
That's,
in the letters
that's what it
report.
says.
we're meeting the night before Valentine's Day, which is better than last year when we met on Valentine's
Yeah,
Day.
that's.
I mean,
Okay, I'll be-
I still think we should have chocolate.
Fair.
Yeah.
I might not be here in February. Done. I think I'm flying back.
Public,
Kentucky.
no, closing comments. Could you start us off?
So I was talking with Caroline during the break, I mentioned the Shop at the Cop event
Mhm.
that Lieutenant Wilson was at. And I would just, as we go into a new year, we should potentially think about like partnership opportunities that we could do
Mhm.
in the public to both, as Carol and I talked about, show the public that we are connected in some way, but also to the officers that we are people and we see them as people also.
I like that. Be interesting, we'll work on that too. Yeah, let's keep talking. That's a great idea.
Have you done a
Could we do
Friday?
like a pizza party for all the officers who don't have complaints against them?
Yeah, it's like,
That's them? Wow.
Just kidding.
Important.
Have you done a ride along?
That is a way of saying it.
I would encourage you to do a ride along.
love, I like
Yeah.
got set up in the summer and it didn't work out.
Yeah, but I think we're post-COVID enough that they're
Yeah.
allowing ride-alongs and, yeah.
You can do it right, you can send to me, that's fine, I'll make it happen.
Do we get to ride along with you?
No, yeah.
My days of pushing the car around are over. I could still do it, but I pay for it for a few days after. It's a young man's game, it really is.
Okay, pizza party, but let's have a different criteria.
Mhm.
Like sell the most magazine subscriptions or something like that.
Oh,
I think I think it's like if there was a way to invite them to come and talk to us in an environment where they would be willing to talk to us, because again, the people the officers that have come and watched us talk about their cases over the years have usually been quite surprised, pleasantly surprised by how we discuss these things. And they appreciated the amount of time and effort and discussion that we had. Only once did they like storm out of the room, like, what a joke is this? And left. And it was like, that person wasn't open to the whole process to begin with. And so it wasn't surprising. But I mean, I think it's like if there was a way to, have more conversations with them, I think that would be a good thing. Closing comments. So I kind of mentioned a little bit over the break that I was trying to come up with an analogy that, would fit, but I don't think there really is one that, when we look at these, it's like, we're really quite lucky in Eugene, what we're looking at. Because the flip side of this is the officer in Alabama who had a man in handcuffs bent over the hood of the car, and he was asking a question and she started tasing him. I think she's already on admin leave or been fired, but and then as I was sharing that the shop with a cop, the girlfriend of a cop went and the two of them started shoplifting while they were shopping for shop with
That
cop.
was not here?
I was in Florida.
But it's definitely not here.
That was not here.
No,
Yeah.
I didn't.
So, I mean, so it's like when yeah, she had on a t-shirt that says Santa, I can explain. So, and so, so it's one of those things, it's like when you see those things, you recognize that it's like, we're quite lucky with what we're looking at. And it doesn't mean that something like this, if not discussed with the officer, couldn't grow to something more, and which is why we appreciate, the strongly worded, adjudication. But I think sometimes we forget, how lucky we are, when we see, 120-mile-an-hour pit maneuver, it's like, what's our 40 miles an hour, 45? Is that the maximum? 35, yeah. It's like, you just kind of, it's shocking the things that go on in the police world outside of our little world. And it makes me appreciate that, we have officers that will, bring things to the auditor's office and to their sergeants and to their lieutenants and to the IA to ask for some eyes on it. And so it doesn't mean that we can't, continue to get better, but we're pretty doggone good. And I appreciate that we do. And that most of the officers that go through this process, you can see the self-reflection of, yeah, I could have done this a little differently. So those are my closing ramblings. Rick's not gonna say.
I don't think.
You should have
Always.
just called something, just.
Well, last word, whatever your persuasion is, happy and safe holiday season, and hopes for peace and health and prosperity for everyone in the new year, and see you all the day before Valentine's Day. So thank Thank you.
Thanks, Alan.
Do we have
Take
any-
care of yourself.
I have,
Thank
I have
you.
closing comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chair, I'm
It's okay.
sorry.
No, it's okay.
There's no public.
I put in the chat, if anybody want to make
Is-
public comment, nobody's
Is there
responding.
public?
One.
Oh, nice, good. Okay, my closing comment is I hope that in the new year, we can hire more officers that can be doing traffic patrol, because I see a need for that in our community with traffic, but
I didn't expect it. You surprise me every time.
try to. I've heard from public members that it's fine to go 15 miles an hour because there are no cops who are gonna stop me anyway. And
50 miles per hour, like.
over, yeah. And I said, well, there are other reasons to not do that, but we don't need to get into that. So yeah, that's my New Year's wish, is that Eugene could be safer.
That is
And
my wish too.
I don't like hearing people say that, because I don't know, my kid's gonna be driving soon, and I drive.
Okay.
Anyway, that's my closing comment. Can we do that? Can we do that? Make it happen?
Make it.
We can try.
Thank you.
Just because you asked.
Thank
The
you. Yes.
unfortunate part is our traffic officers are most of the time out on the belt line and 126 and nailing people at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Lots.
I know, but then
It's insane.
that is insane, and I see it,
Yeah.
and I never see them get nailed. But you know, time and
Yeah.
place. But then I also don't like publicly saying that they're mostly out there, because then everyone knows like, oh, it doesn't matter because I'm on Willamette or I'm on Covert, like.
Just a trick to get people to.
Oh,
I
nobody
wish.
drives Willamette anymore after they've done all those
Yeah.
changes. It's
like,
like,
it's-
We are off the
Police
rails, y'all.
officers.
okay,
They're
sorry.
not just on.
Not you. All of us.
No, I know, and I think that need is there, obviously, when they're going 100. And maybe
Wait till there's ice storm.
And I think we're adjourned.
we are, no public commenting,
No, I asked. and
Thank
no one
you.
responded.
and now I will adjourn for the final time. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.